So I want to tell you about this photo because it's a funny story. One day the phone rang in my office, and I'm usually not the person in front of the camera, but this time it was a gentleman named Emmanuel El Chivo Lubezki, Mexican like me, and one of the most celebrated cinematographers in history. He has 5 Oscars for movies like The Revenant and Gravity, and he wanted to make a photograph of me because he said to me that I was an influencer. And I said, no, I may be, I'm influential. And he had this idea that I was going to be in a bikini and it was going to be 2 manta rays. And I'm thinking, I wonder if he knows that I'm almost 60. So anyway, we ended up making this photo, which I think is so much more appropriate. It's my tribute to the Mexican artisanal fishermen. And before I tell you why I do what I do, I want to show you how I do it, because believe it or not, after all these years, people still believe that my husband makes my pictures for me. I know. So anyway, I want to show you how I do my work. Yeah, it's a pretty good job. And no, I'm not an influencer, but I am pretty influential. And it is an amazing thing that being a conservation wildlife photographer, I am one of the 2 female photographers with the most followers on Instagram. Yeah. The other one is my dear friend, Amy Vitale, who's here somewhere, and she's speaking tomorrow. And if you don't follow Amy, please give her a follow. And if you don't follow me, well, shame on you. But, I want to take you back to the very beginning, because there's a lot of new photographers here, and those first few years being a photographer are so daunting. So I want to share with you one of my first experiences traveling to the Amazon. I was sent there when I was working for Conservation International. It was the first time that I had an experience to be on assignment. And it was truly one of those fake it till you make it kind of situations. I didn't know what I was doing. But I got on an airplane and I traveled to Brazil, and then on a small Cessna to the middle of the Amazon, until I arrived to this little small village in the middle of nowhere called Kenjam, 150 people. And I had been sent there because the government of Brazil was planning on building the 3rd largest hydroelectric dam in the world in the middle of the Amazon. So if you can imagine the Amazon, it's pretty flat, so the water doesn't really run with any, energy. They had to build a 16-kilometer long wall to retain the water. And what was going to happen is that below the dam, the river was going to become dry. And the many, many indigenous communities that live alongside the river were going to become isolated. There's not a lot of roads. There's very few airstrips. So people move by boat. And I had been sent there to make a portrait of the people that live there. When I say to you hydroelectric dam, you imagine this cement wall. But what they wanted me to bring back was the faces and the lives of the people that were going to be affected. So I traveled all the way there to photograph just how intimately interdependent the people and the river are, and how their lives were going to be affected. After traveling 24 hours, I finally got to this village, middle of nowhere, and the chief said to me, at this point, I don't speak Portuguese. I learned later. Good lesson for anybody doing this kind of work, learn the language. And he said to me, you're gonna be living with my daughter. And she gave me the hammock way in the back. And I was so exhausted that I just wrapped myself in a blanket and I went to sleep. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, where you're traveling to somewhere and you wake up in the middle of the night and it's pitch black and you have no idea where you are. But I could hear voices and people touching me. And so I got up in the morning and they explained to me that they were very worried that I was there without my husband or my children. And they were so concerned that I was going to be lonely. So they were keeping me company. I know, really extraordinary people. But I was a very immature photographer, so I thought that the best thing to photograph would be the animals in the village. And every household kept some kind of creature. In the house where I was living, they had this little tiny pygmy owl. They're about 6 inches tall, completely nocturnal. You hear them calling, but you never get to see them. And here was one, just living in my house. So I started going house to house, and you realize that people keep small forest pigs and they keep monkeys and animals like this. You guys know what this is? Oh my God, you guys are such geeks. Yes, a baby capybara. One thing that I learned very quickly is that in the Amazon, and in fact, in many of these remote villages, you cannot get too attached to animals because the line between pet and food is really blurry. But every household had one of these, a lot of birds, a lot of macaws and parrots, because they cut their flight feathers so they cannot fly away. And these birds are just jumping around the village, playing with the children, with the dogs. And every few weeks, they pluck a few feathers and let them live, because they make these beautiful headdresses for the chiefs. And the chiefs of every one of the communities in this massive area of the Amazon had traveled by foot or by boat to this one village to talk about the future of their community. These are some of the most fearsome warriors you will ever meet. The Kayapo people of the Amazon are still fighting for the integrity of their forest, and there's in fact a brand new movie produced by Leonardo DiCaprio about what's happening in the Amazon. But anyway, back to photography. I thought that one of the most interesting things that was happening in this village was the fact that people did all this body painting. Initially, I thought that they were tattoos, but then I realized, that they paint themselves. And the way that they do it is really interesting. It's an ink made with a fruit from a tree in the forest called the jenipap. It's about the size of a baseball. And they send the children up to the tree. They come down with the fruit and cut it open. And then they mash the flesh of the fruit and mix it with ash. And it creates this semi-permanent ink. It lasts about 2 weeks. And they spend hours painting each other. Just the enormous detail. And to see a child that's 6 or 7 years old, for hours sitting there patiently being painted. Because the painting tells you a lot about who a person is. You can learn if somebody's married or single or whose household they belong to. And it's really interesting because boys are really simple. They like to be painted like animals. So you'll see them covered in dots like the jaguar or completely black like the monkeys. The girls, however, are way more sophisticated. And they like very intricate paintings. They like basketry and weaving and nets. And they also, if you notice, they shave their eyebrows and they shave the top of their head. And these are all signs of beauty. So when you arrive in these villages, they immediately want to make you beautiful like them. And you have to learn how to establish boundaries fairly quickly because it's kind of hard to explain at the jerks at the TSA, when you come back through Miami, what's going on with all this? Anyway, one of the most important things that you can do when you visit remote places like this is just have the courtesy of learning a few words in the local language. And one of the most important words is the word for hello. In Kayapo, you say, me komene. And it has a simple meaning. It means hi, good morning, but it also has a much more profound meaning. It literally translates to I see you. And in a community of 150 people in the middle of nowhere, seeing your neighbors eye to eye is really important because it means that your life depends on them and you're accountable to them as well. So me komene is really important. Anyway, I'm making pictures and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And one day I'm standing in the middle of the village. It's a massive village in a circle. And I see a group of women coming up from the river. And they are talking to each other and gossiping, and they have a tiny baby with them. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder what happened. You know, they probably just took these, they had a brand new baby, took him to the river for the baby's first bath. And I thought, oh, that would have been a really cool picture that shows how the fate of this child will be forever tied to the fate of the river. But of course, I had missed it. So being clever as I am, I thought, you know, no problem. In the morning, I'll ask the mother if she might take the baby back down to the river. We'll just reenact the whole thing, taking my photos. But when we woke up in the morning in the village, we realized that the baby had not lived through the night. And as it happens in many of these remote places where there's no medical services, there's a lot of child mortality. Because I didn't speak the language or understand the culture, by the time I figured out what was happening, they had already buried the baby. And there was nothing for me to photograph. At this point, I'm feeling sorry for myself. I'm thinking, man, I wish they had sent a photographer with more experience, somebody who would understand these cultural nuances and be able to make these difficult photographs. And I'm there beating myself in the middle of the village when I hear a noise. And it is a woman walking straight into the middle of the village. And she is sobbing. And people are getting out of her way, and she's marching straight to where I'm standing. And she has a machete in her hand. And with the blunt side of the machete, she's hitting her forehead, and so there's blood everywhere. And as she gets closer, I see that she is carrying something. And she's covered in mud. So this poor woman, in her sorrow, had gone and she had dug up the body of her baby, and she was carrying it around. And she's coming straight at me, and I'm standing there with my cameras petrified. Because all I can think about is my own children back home, and how would I feel if a stranger shoved a camera in my face when I just lost my baby? So I didn't take any pictures. A few weeks later, we learned that the hydroelectric dam had been approved and construction was to begin immediately. And I thought about the people in those villages and how I had lacked the courage to do the job that I was sent to do. And that day really changed my life, because I realized that if my photography is going to be about purpose and giving a voice to the voiceless, well, it's going to require a lot of courage. The courage to take the pictures that are uncomfortable, to talk to the people you don't want to talk to put yourself in situations that are really disagreeable. But that's the job. And so for the last 30 years, that's what I've been doing. Luckily, I have been able to go back to many of those villages and give a voice to many of these indigenous communities. And I want to tell you why they're so important. But before I do that, I want to take you back way to the beginning. I grew up in Mexico City. I'm part of a Catholic family, 5 children. My parents were just professionists, and they were not particularly outdoorsy. So we never went camping, or we didn't have, wild pets. But I read a lot of books, and I was subscribed to National Geographic. And I just loved animals. And I think that every child on this planet is born with an innate curiosity and love for animals. And it is our parents and our teachers that teach us to be afraid or to dismiss or to think that these things are not important or not profitable. I was lucky though, because my mom really, really loves animals as well, so she always encouraged it. And so I would beg her, I wanted to see dolphins, and so she took me to this lake in the middle of Mexico City. It's called Lake Xochimilco. It's one of the most polluted lakes in the world. But I swear to you that in my childhood imagination, there were dolphins and manatees there. So my mom encouraged me, and I went on to study marine biology in university. And again, I went off to school, thinking that I was going to be swimming with dolphins and whales. None of that. I spent 4 years looking at the ocean through a microscope and learning about plankton and learning about why the ocean is the engine of our planet, which I think a lot of people don't think about every day. So I wanted to spend time with animals like this. This is an orca in the northern fjords of Lofoten. This is part of a project that my husband, Paul Nicklin, and I did to try to keep big oil away from these fjords where thousands of orcas come in every winter following the herring. And we succeeded. We worked with a youth group, and they were able to pass a moratorium on big oil coming in here. Yeah, photography has tremendous power to galvanize public action. Or a photograph like this. This is a rain wolf. This is not a timber wolf. This is a unique species that only lives on the coast of British Columbia. They just recently described it as new, and it's the equivalent of finding like an albino species of lion in Africa. You think it'd be protected, but it's not. So people can just buy a $5 license and shoot at it from boats. So Sea Legacy, my husband and I, we rallied with 100 other photographers, and we raised money, and we bought every single hunting license in an enormous tenure. So now So now if people want to go and kill a wolf, they have to call me. Or a photograph like these. These are greater flamingos on the coast of the Yucatan in my home country of Mexico. For me, being a photographer was really just a selfish pursuit of being in nature with animals. But one of the first things I learned is that animals don't always want to have their picture taken. And for the geeks in the room, yeah, that was an A900. That was one of Sony's first cameras, way back when. But it allowed me to make photographs like this. Because for me, all animals are important. They are the building blocks of life on Earth. So whereas it's a freshwater crab from Madagascar or one of the largest tuskers left on our planet, this is Craig, one of the giant elephants of Amboseli. For me, you know, every single creature on this planet really matters. What I really wanted to do was to find a way to take my camera underwater. Who here is an underwater photographer? It is, look at that, 3, 4 people. It is incredibly expensive. It is technically challenging. It's just difficult access. So how do you bring your cameras underwater? Oh my God, Sony loves this clip. Because I just put the cameras back in a box and I send them back to Neil Manowitz with a little note that says, they work, they just need cleaning. Anyway, it's to be able to make photographs like this. This is a loggerhead sea turtle, and I photographed it off the coast of Portugal in the North Atlantic. The water temperature was 10 degrees Celsius. It was pretty cold. And there were a lot of these sea turtles floating around. And when I got in the water, I was sure that this sea turtle was going to be spooked and swim away, but it didn't. It just kind of hung around there. So I was able to swim all the way around and look at its little fish that it had with it. And in its fin, it had a little tag, science tag, that told me that this turtle was born in West Palm Beach, Florida. 8,000 kilometers, 5,000 miles from where I found it. Who knows, you know, how it came out of a little shell and wandered off the beach into the ocean and then caught probably a ride on one of the big currents and ended up here in the middle of the North Atlantic. But one day, for only reasons that only she knows, she will make a U-turn and she will go back to the same beach where it was born, following an invisible map that exists only in its head. See, to me, animals are not just creatures that are here to entertain or for us to exploit. They're our fellow passengers on Spaceship Earth, and we don't know the role that they play. But I think they're all very, very important. Animals like this is a stellar sea lion. I photographed this right in front of my house in the Salish Sea in British Columbia. And these animals migrate. They go to the Aleutian Islands, and then they come back in the spring, following the herring and following the females. The males get there first, and you know, they fight for territory, and then after a few days, they get bored. And so if you're a diver and you get in the water with them, they just are so curious and so excited to come and hang out. But they are terribly abused by fishermen. You know, they get thrown bombs at and they get poked with sticks. So they're very shy. So if you have one hour of air in your tank, you have to be so patient to hang out behind the rock and wait for this animal to trust you enough to come close to where the strobes, your light is going to hit it. But it's worth it to take pictures like this. So I want to talk to you about the title of my presentation because it's called Between Two Worlds. In my entire career, I have been caught between this passion for indigenous knowledge and wildlife. And it was my mother who helped me clarify, you know, what my career was going to be. I was a young mother myself. I have 3 children. And I wanted to disappear into the jungle and just take my cameras with me, but I had these 3 little ones that I had to take care of. So I talked to my mom, and my mom said, you know, why don't you look into this? this concept, ikigai. It's a Japanese concept, and it means the purpose of your life. And she said to me, in order to find your ikigai, the reason why you get out of bed every morning, you have to make 4 lists. The first list is the things that you love. The second one is the things that you're good at. The third one, very important so we can shop at B&H, is what gets you paid. But the last one is perhaps the most important, and I think it's where a lot of people fall short, and that is what the world needs. And when you find the confluence of these 4 things, you will find your passion, your mission, your profession, your vocation, your reason for getting out of bed every morning. And I was pretty lucky that I found my ikigai very early on, because it was not an easy thing. This photograph was taken 20 years ago. Now my son, my oldest one, is 40 years old. My youngest one sleeping down there, she's 28. But understanding that maybe wildlife was not going to be, or underwater was not going to be the first path, led me to start photographing indigenous people. And this career of mine, 30 years photographing indigenous people, has given me so much in terms of rewards. What you're looking at here is not just a nice showcase of indigenous cultures and people that are disappearing, and it's also not an effort to exoticize or other indigenous people. It is 30 years of trying to elevate and highlight the imperative of protecting the sovereign rights of indigenous people, because what they know is really important. The problem is that the knowledge that they have doesn't exist in textbooks. It is whispered from generation to generation around campfires all over the world, in their stories and their songs and their traditions and their rituals. And what they know is pretty important, because from the Amazon to the Arctic, from Patagonia to Papua New Guinea, indigenous people don't just live with nature. They are interwoven into every one of the last remaining ecosystems on planet Earth. And this knowledge is critical for our own survival. It doesn't matter where you look, indigenous people are already confronted with climate change. And they are adapting with grace and courage and moral clarity and incredibly fierce advocacy for change. So as we think our own adaptation plans, we should be listening to indigenous people. Yeah, with curiosity and good humor, right? I mean, it's not all gloom and doom. So standing up for the sovereign rights of indigenous people is not an act of charity. It's an act of survival, because what they know is not just, spiritual smoke, mumbo jumbo, feathers and tattoos and superstitions. It is a series of ethical and moral guidelines for how to be a good human on planet Earth. And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. So yeah, it's not an act of charity. It's an act of survival, standing up for indigenous people. But I want to take us back to the ocean, because for 30 years, I have spent half of my life underwater. This is a photograph of me that Paul took under the big waves of the pipeline in northern Oahu in Hawaii. And the ocean truly is the most magnificent spectacle on planet Earth. It is also pretty important. It is the largest and the most defining ecosystem on our planet. It's 70% of planet Earth. Can you imagine that more people have been to the surface of the moon than have been to the bottom of the ocean? There's no human ever that has gone down all 7 miles to the bottom of the ocean and stood outside of a vehicle. So, Elon might go to Mars, but he cannot go to the bottom of the ocean. But the ocean is important for other reasons. It produces half of the oxygen that we breathe, and it absorbs 25% of the carbon emissions in the atmosphere. Were it not for the ocean, we would already be cooked alive, because it has also absorbed 90% of the excess heat in the atmosphere. And it does this because it's alive. When you go to the beach and you get tumbled by a wave and you take a big gulp of water, you're not just drinking water, you're drinking a rich broth of microorganisms. From microscopic plants to eggs and larvae, animals that grow up to be like this big egg yolk jellyfish that I photographed in British Columbia. The ocean is alive, and it's doing the job of keeping this planet alive. It truly is the engine of our planet. And it's creatures like this. Who here knows what a rebreather diving apparatus is? A handful of people. Scuba, when you breathe, it's compressed air and you breathe bubbles out. And bubbles are pretty scary for most underwater animals. So in order to get close to wildlife, a rebreather is a really useful tool. You rebreathe your breath over and over and over again. You don't have bubbles, but you're producing CO2, which needs to be scrubbed, and you need more oxygen, O2, that needs to be injected. It's a dangerous machine, but it makes you invisible. It's like Harry Potter. Animals don't know that you're there. So I was in Raja Ampat a couple of months ago, and we were doing night diving because the temperature of the ocean water is so warm that most of the fish have moved really deeper, and there was nothing for us to photograph. So we started diving at night and photographing mackerel. And it's an incredibly fun thing to do. You put your head in the muck, and an hour later you emerge with amazing pictures of tiny creatures. But one of the problems of having no bubbles is that it's easy to lose your dive buddies. So I'm diving, I look up, and everybody's gone. I'm all alone. And I'm thinking, I'm only 40 feet deep, I'll keep diving. And at this point, it's pitch black, and I'm a little worried. I'm a little, unnerved. It's very dark, and I'm all alone. And somebody had told me that divers have been attacked by crocodiles here. So that's what's in the back of my mind. And so I'm back to photographing when I feel like somebody's watching me. And sure enough, I look over my shoulder and I see movement, and I turn around with my camera, and there he is, this little guy, that big. And he's just kind of looking over my shoulder, seeing what I'm doing. And when he sees the lights of my strobes, he gets all excited. And then he just starts emitting light from his skin. And he's just putting up this show, and then he gets a glimpse of himself in the dome of my underwater housing. And then he gets truly excited, and he starts reaching out with his tentacles. I spent the most fascinating half an hour with this tiny creature, just him and I in the bottom of the ocean. And I kept thinking, most of us will only know this as calamari, and we'll only meet him swimming in mayonnaise. But these are the magical creatures that we share our planet with, because it's not just the phytoplankton, it's biomes like seagrass meadows and kelp forests that are the rainforests of the underwater world. And we're just beginning to understand the role that big animals like whales play in the carbon cycle. Whales, I didn't know until fairly recently, are like giant earth mums. They swim on top of the ocean, and then they dive, sometimes 2-3 miles to look for food. And down there, where there's lots of mineral-rich food, they feed, and then they come up to the surface again, and they poop. And that poop is fertilizer for the phytoplankton. So it is this loop that's keeping our oceans alive. And scientists are telling us, that after the whaling years, we have lost so many of the great big whales. And we need them as allies to combat climate change, so we should be protecting them. And yet, there are many countries, including Norway and Denmark and Iceland and Japan, still killing whales for food. And this is important because the ocean is not just important for climate and for food, it's also important because it provides sustenance for 3.5 billion people on this planet that live on the edge of the sea, including New York. Shipping, commerce, food, all of these things, tourism, really important. And yet, in the last 50 years, we have extracted already 90% of the big fish on the ocean, the big tuna, the big sharks. I don't understand how we normalize the idea of underwater slaughter. If we were to do the same on land, it would be like taking machine guns to the Serengeti and just mowing down elephants and leopards and putting that in the grocery shelves. And fish are pretty important in keeping the ocean alive, especially in places like coral reefs. The reefs of our planet harbor 25% of all the life in the ocean, but they too are in trouble. This is what a live, living coral should look like. These are soft corals in Raja Ampat. But this is what's happening. The temperature of the water is so warm that corals cannot survive. So they die, they bleach, and then they disintegrate. They become sand. And I was talking to the CEO of a big company and explaining that 90% of the Great Barrier Reef bleached this year. 54 countries reported bleaching around the globe. I don't think the temperature is going to get any cooler. And so we should expect to lose coral reefs in the next 10 to 15 years. We have already sentenced our children to a planet without coral reefs. And I'm explaining this to the CEO, a very important man. You know what he said to me? Oh, I'm glad I didn't get my scuba certification. I know. And I think that's part of the problem. We think this is not our problem. But you can imagine what happens with so many people lose their livelihood when coastlines lose the protection of coral reefs and everybody becomes a refugee. And it's not just, the stuff that we're taking out or the temperature of the ocean, it's the amount of trash that we're putting in the ocean. This is the beach of Bali in front of the Four Seasons on New Year's Day. And this was like 2 miles down the beach, just this deep, trash everywhere. And so when people say to me, what can I do? I shouldn't even have to tell you, but we are in a lot of trouble because the temperatures of our planet are not just affecting, the tropical regions. In the polar regions, it's pretty serious as well. Antarctica is warming 4 times faster than anywhere else on the planet. And one of the things that's happening is there's a change in regime. It doesn't snow so much anymore. Now it rains. And the baby chicks, they're used to cleaning off the snow off their feathers. But the mucky mess that is created when it rains is something they cannot cope with. So they get caked in this mud, and when the temperature drops at night, they die of hypothermia. And the Arctic is no different. The Arctic is warming even faster. In the next 15 to 20 years, there's going to be no sea ice in the summer months in the Arctic. And countries see this as a great opportunity. Now we can put oil rigs there and we can exploit minerals. But this is going to have enormous consequences, not just for polar bears, for everybody. So, pretty grim, huh? I am going to confess to you that some days it's really hard to be in the front lines of all of this and to be so aware. And it's easy to feel hopeless and to feel desperate, especially when you talk to young people and they're so aware. But my job is to remain hopeful and inspiring and optimist. So a year ago, I started writing a book. And I thought, I'm going to write this for myself. This is going to be my life raft. When I'm feeling hopeless and I need to hold on to something, I'm going to look at the work and the deeds and the courage of others. Because the battle that we're in is grim, it's nasty. But we're like a choir. And when you're in a choir, we're all singing. And on the dark days when you need to take a break and catch your breath, the music doesn't stop. Somebody else is still singing. Somebody else is still doing the good fight. So that's what this book means to me. I want to briefly talk to you about Sea Legacy. This is an organization that my husband and I started, a nonprofit, because we wanted to put our skills and our talents as photographers and storytellers in service of our planet. And we struggled a little while, what stories do you tell? So we decided to start telling the stories of the heroes on the front lines, the thousands of organizations, mom and pop operations that are cleaning up beaches, they're replanting corals, they're saving sea turtles, but they're invisible. Nobody knows about them because they're in Indonesia or they're in Mexico. And so what we do is we travel around the world, we point our lenses and our social media accounts to their work, and we help them raise money and raise awareness. So if you follow Sea Legacy, just please comment, share, and like. It really helps these people that are holding the avalanche of destruction in the front lines. I want to close by bragging a little bit. We are nominated for an Emmy for a series that we did with National Geographic. Thank you. The Emmys are next week, and we're competing against a wonderful story of a man that's in love with his little otter. We're not going to win, but, but it's worth watching. And this is a series that was done for National Geographic. It's called Photographer. And it was filmed by Jimmy Chin and Chai Vasarhali, amazing filmmakers. And I just want to show you the 1-minute teaser for this. The only way you can change the world is with stories. And the bigger your legend becomes, the easier it is to share the story. People want to hear it, they want to listen.
Winds to 35 knots or higher possible in thunderstorms. Showers and thunderstorms.
We are in an environmental emergency. And having this vessel out there telling these stories is actually really hopeful and inspiring.
It looks like somebody just dropped a frickin' chandelier right on the ocean.
Yeah.
You don't realize the size and the scale of this oil rig. It's a floating city. Now we're on this mission to chase big oil out of the Bahamas, just using our cameras. All right, this is it.
Ah. Did we chase big oil out of the Bahamas? Did we turn another page in history? You have to watch. For those of you who know me, I'm married to a Canadian photographer, Paul Nicklin, so I live in Canada now, and I'm learning how to be Canadian. I've also learned over the last 30 years that one of the biggest mistakes we have made in the environmental movement is assuming that somebody else is going to stand up and do something about the mess we're in. And so I came up with an acronym. I call it SELFIE. It stands for someone else is likely fixing it, eh? To remind us that nobody else is coming to fix it. You know, Elon is not going to Mars, and there's no spaceship coming to fix this mess. This one is on us. It's going to be each and every one of us standing for each other to create a better planet, not giving up, not expecting that a handful of us are going to do all the work that is going to turn this ship around. And don't ask me what you can do. There's so much that we already know, so let's just do it. And the biggest thing that we can do as storytellers, as creators, as influencers, is to put on the superhero suit every morning, pick up a cause, and use your camera to actually make this planet a better place, so that when we look around a room like this, we can actually see each other in the eye and say, I am accountable to you, and I will be so for the rest of my life. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Do you wanna do questions?
We have time.
We have time.
We are ahead of time, so we have time for questions.
You briefly mentioned Elon Musk. I wrote an essay a while back kind of criticizing the idea that, we're reaching out to space, trying to figure out whether or not Mars is able to habitat humans. And the fact that, pre-industrial revolution, we didn't know about global warming or even, I don't know, carbon or something. And the idea that we still, well, to be blunt, we still found a way to fuck it up.
That's right.
So I'm wondering, why are we reaching out to, what is your opinion on the fact that we're trying to habitate Mars, but we're not trying to fix our own planet? Because theoretically, if we get to Mars, won't the same thing happen? Won't it just loop and loop and loop?
What a great question. Thank you for that. I think human ego is one of the most dangerous things on this planet, and Elon has an abundance of that. But there's just something really silly about his idea that people are going to go to Mars. Because who here has a ticket to go with Elon? Who's going? Oh, no, we're not invited. We're not going. We're staying here. So he may go, and frankly, good riddance, Help me say goodbye. The truth of the matter is, as far as we know, there is no life anywhere else in this galaxy or elsewhere. We are a tiny spaceship traveling alone across the universe. This is all we have. This is all we will ever have. And the fact of the matter is that the pilots, the captains of the spaceship have no clue what they're doing. They don't understand how the systems works. They don't even know where the engine is. And so we need people like indigenous people and biologists and young people to remind us on how to steer the ship in the right direction. So I think Elon is mad, and I think we pay too much attention to the things that he does. And I think it's just a matter of having a big ego. So let's not have a big ego, right? Let's be humble. Thanks for that question.
Can I ask you, can you talk about the ILCP and how we can aggregate photographers, scientists, and people to work together, collaborative for conservation?
Yes, thank you. The ILCP, the International League of Conservation Photographers, this was an organization I created in 2005. It's been a long time. And the idea was, I used to go to events like this where we never talked about the environment or conservation, and I was always very frustrated because I would raise my hand and I would say, hey, can we use our photographs to advocate for the places and the things that we photograph? And I was told unequivocally, no, we are not environmentalists. People wanted to talk about the filters and the latest lens. So I started my own organization, International League of Conservation Photographers. And it started out with 40 of the biggest names in photography, people like Franz Lanting and Nick Nichols and Art Wolf and Paul Nicklin, my husband, and many others who were not just taking pictures of the things that matter, they were actually using those photographs as tools of advocacy to advocate for new protected areas, for new national parks, for new species protection. So the ILCP is now, God, 21 years old, my goodness. Yes. And, when I die, I hope that my legacy is that this was created, because I didn't do it just for myself. I did it so that thousands of other photographers who have this, eagerness to do more. I think we're all tired of being asked to do as little as possible. We want to give the full extent of our passion. And I wanted the ILCP to be that platform where other photographers can come together, raise money, speak with a common voice, and advocate for our planet. So are you a member of the ILCP? Applying. Good luck.
Hi, Mitty.
Oh, sorry. I'm not the moderator, sorry.
First, I want to say thank you so much. I've followed you and Paul for years
Thank
and
you.
years and years, and thank you for doing everything you're doing. My question is, you're a big voice. We're little voices, some of us. I mean, even though I have a big mouth. First, it's a two-part question. What do we do to the naysayers? I mean, I actually am a teacher as well, and I work with teachers who laugh at me at times when I bring up the environment. They make fun of me. That's number one. Like, what do you say? Like, what's something very convincing to them? And two, do you think with the advent of all this social media and our phones constantly at our sides, is this a benefit or is this a detriment because people are becoming so narcissistic with these machines?
Oh my God, two very difficult questions. So what do you say to the naysayers? Years ago, somebody showed me the bell curve of, where people are in their beliefs and principles on the environment. And we have the big believers, and then we have a curve of people who, are interested but not sure. And then we have the naysayers. And somebody said to me, do not waste your time with the naysayers. The bulk of the people are in the curve. So to somebody who says, the environment is a laughable matter, just say, you do you, because they're going down with the ship no matter what, even if the band's still playing. But it is the bulk of the people that you need to use your energy on, the ones that are not sure how to enter the conversation. And we need to talk to them in a way that's inviting and that's optimistic and hopeful and not gloom and doom. And so focus your energy there, I would say, first of all. And the second one, is social media a detriment or a help? I would say there was a time when I thought that social media was going to allow us to have a conversation globally with each other around all these issues. And now it's so polarized, the algorithms are so crooked that I'm not so sure anymore. But I do still think that human communication is the most important thing we can be doing. And I think in a venue like this, I probably have more impact than I do with my social media every day, because I hope that I'm able to look at you in the eye and invite you to be a bigger part of the solutions for our planet. So don't waste too much time on social media. It's all marketing now.
All right, one last question. We have 2 minutes.
Yeah, hi.
Where are you?
Right here.
Oh, there.
How much time do you dedicate, what percentage of your time do you dedicate to understanding your equipment, learning your equipment?
How much time do I dedicate to understanding my equipment? Quite a bit. A lot. I'm very lucky because Sony is always, giving me the latest and the greatest, and I have to understand it. So, yeah, lately, I've been reading manuals, but then the underwater component makes it even more complex because light behaves in a different way underwater. And then the whole post-production thing, the whole Lightroom, Adobe side of things, it's a whole different permanent learning curve, right? We're always learning new tools. But you know what? I think as photographers, we love all that. I love knowing how the new technology can help us achieve images that we couldn't even dream of just 10 years ago. And I find it an interesting and fun challenge. So the answer to the question is I'm going to say 30% of my time. You know that photo of the elephant? I'm just learning low-angle remote photography.
Very cool. Very cool. All right.
No, thank you so
Thank you.
much. I'll be around. Thank you.